Well, I'm here with Dr. Brad Robinson. This is another episode of The Compass. And today we're talking about a very important topic, one that is kind of taking the culture by storm. And Dr. Brad, a lot of headlines lately are linking acetaminophen, or other people know it as Tylenol, to autism when it's taken during pregnancy. So, as a clinician, what's sort of your first reaction as you're hearing those headlines in the past couple of weeks?
Well, I think my first reaction, I actually have several, and I feel like it's obviously a big topic. I've worked with autism my whole career. I remember first, as a med student, being sent off to the medical school library at Mizzou to do some research for a child and adolescent psychiatry fellow and one of my professors, as we were, doing some stuff and possibly going to write a paper on some things. And so I started doing research and looking at some of the very early literature on autism, and I've followed it since then for many years. I've trained with some of the national experts in autism. So it's not a topic that I'm unfamiliar with. And clinically, I've worked with patients and families with autism for many,
And it's
many
fair to
years.
say that before you became the board certified psychiatrist, you worked in as a pediatrician. Is that correct?
Yeah. I trained, I started out doing a triple board program in psychiatry, child and adolescent psychiatry and pediatrics. And because of that, I did more work in pediatrics than most psychiatrists have done. And actually my mentor for a couple of years during my time there at the University of Utah was a developmental pediatrician. So yeah, I mean, I've kind of had, various avenues into this particular topic throughout my whole career. And so, the first thing I would want to do here is to say to folks, look, I'm not trying to oversimplify a complex issue, and I'm certainly not trying to stir up more internet hype, which is we have way too much of. If people really want to do a deep dive, I actually just watched this myself this week. It's an 1.5-hour video by Dr. Peter Attia. We'll put a link to it on our website, the Compass. He and his team, did a deep dive into this issue and really did a great job of explaining the research. And in many ways, that's one of the things, the first take-home message that I would say to families that are dealing with autism. Now, people out there that are just trying to get hits and likes and stuff on the internet, I don't have anything to say to those folks, right? It's like, I don't know. And really, in some ways, even to the politicians out there that are just doing, whatever. I don't have an opinion or don't have anything to say to those folks. To the parents, though, that are dealing with autism, and to the parents to the people that are worried about this and are worried about, well, what's going on? What are the risks? I want to have kids, or I'm pregnant, and what are the risks? Those are the people that my heart goes out to.
Yeah.
Dr. Attia's, review of this is excellent. It's spot on. I can't really add anything to it.
Well, because what he does is he dives into the studies that prove one side and also disprove another side, and he actually breaks down the nuances of the studies and then helps articulate it.
Yeah, right. What he does is he looks at the complexity of it. And I would say I don't even know if I would even use the word prove or disprove. I think part of what he says is, okay, let's dive into this. And that's what I would say today in my main point of looking at this is, for those families that are really concerned about this, you do have to embrace the complexity of it. You don't embrace the conspiracy theory of it. Embrace the complexity and do the research, like really look at it. But that means you have to understand how to weed out massive amounts of BS on the internet And you have to be able to dive into research and understand how research is done, understand statistics and what statistics can tell us and what statistics can't tell us, about cause and effect and those sort of things. And Dr. Atia's dive into that, I felt like was really good. And I think he made it as understandable as you can without diving in and getting a PhD and learning statistics and all that stuff. So just go there is my first message.
Mhm.
Now, I can give just a thumbnail sketch of what I see, and Dr. Tia, talked about these exact things, and these are the things that I would tell families. These are the things that I would tell my adult children who have kids and are having kids and are wanting to have kids, is the fact that the number one factor, Dr. Tia quoted some numbers on this, and I think his numbers are very solid and very well supported. Probably 60 to 70% of the variance of why autism has, quote unquote, been skyrocketing in prevalence. Please hear this, folks, and dive into it. I know it's a hot button, stuff, but the reality is 60 to 70% of the variance is because we changed the diagnostic criteria. Like, we broaden the diagnostic criteria, and so it makes it look like autism is like going through the roof. But 60 to 70% of that rise in prevalence is because we broadened the diagnostic criteria. Period. End of. That really does explain it. Now, there's more. There is other things going on. The second thing that takes into account probably a big part of the rest of the variance is the delay in age of having children. We're, as a society, we're having children later and later. We know that's associated with various increased risks, and it correlates with the increase in autism pretty much better than anything else. And it's not just maternal age, it's paternal age. So the age of the father has a big impact on that. So that data is there. Dr. Atia dives into that in more detail. Now, when you take into account those two things, there's still some question about, well, what is going on? Are there other things, other factors? Are there exposures? Are there environmental toxins? Are there various things? And again, there's research on that topic, but those first two things that we talked about account for a huge part of the increase. Now, Tylenol specifically, the data Dr. Tia went through it in great detail and was very patient in going through it and really helping people see the research and the statistics and the limitations of the research and all of that.
Something he said in one of his studies says the largest, strongest studies were in Sweden with about 2.5 million kids and Japan with about 220,000 kids. He said It shows a tiny association in general cohorts, but those associations disappear in sibling matched analysis, suggesting confounding, not causation. We've talked a lot through different things on this channel about the difference between causation and correlation. Would this be a classic case of that?
Yes, that's exactly what he talks about, and the research points to. There may be some correlation, but there is just no evidence of causation, and the numbers are very, very small. And so, it's like this very, very small percentage of, a chance. It's like, a chance of a chance. There's a very small percentage of a chance.
He called it 0.09 according to
Yeah.
this.
Yeah. Yeah. And so there are other factors, delayed age and having kids being one of the most significant. So there are other factors. The bottom line for me too, like, go there, look at that video. It's a great video. It's an hour and a half long. It's a great video. The bottom line for me to the parents that are worrying about this subject is, I think, at least when it comes to acetaminophen, we can offer a lot of reassurance that, if you're pregnant and you've taken some Tylenol, I don't want you to freak out and worry that your child's going to have autism. I mean, if you can avoid taking Tylenol, fine. But, Dr. Attia talks about this too. I mean, the variance in terms of the possibility that Tylenol is causing autism compared to the possibility that an inflammatory response that you might be having, because of a fever or an infection or something like that might cause autism. It's you can't, I mean, Tylenol is not more likely to cause autism than the fever that you've got from the infection that you've got is to cause autism. It's very, very small percentages.
And I'm glad that you talked about your experience diving into, some of what may be causing autism or what we know about it. If Tylenol is not the likely culprit, do we have a clue of what some major drivers could be? And I'm saying, aside from these casting a bigger net things that we're talking about, obviously, like you're saying, expanding the diagnostic criteria is going to increase that number. There is an aging group. Millennials, as an example, are getting married later and having children later. So aside from those factors, like, autism still exists. Do we know anything about, the culprit or the major driver behind that?
The problem with that is, I mean, my answer to that is no. I mean, to be, overly simplistic, at the risk of being overly simplistic, the reality is no. I'm not convinced that we do. I'm a clinician who worked with families, and I do tend to look at things from a big picture standpoint. And when I see stuff that I feel like really does have an impact on my patients and in their decision making, I definitely want to point it out. But I have not seen anything beyond those two issues that really says, oh, here's the smoking gun that explains it. I think it's just those two issues. I'm not saying there's not other things, but again, please understand what I mean by the complexity of it. As currently defined, which is this very broad spectrum disorder. Mm-hmm. I mean, the last conference I went to on it, which wasn't all that long ago, and they were talking, they spent, God almighty, they spent like half the morning talking about, 10,000 different genetic variants and mutations that cause, that are associated with autism. Well, please forgive me, and those that are the scientists among our listeners, please forgive me, but I'm not uninformed about autism. I've had lots of years of experience, but when I was sitting in that conference, I was just like, come on, folks. That's the same as saying, well, everything causes autism or nothing causes autism. I mean, you're not actually giving me as a clinician or my patients anything that we can do anything with.
Yeah.
You're just saying, oh, well, there's this thing. We've made it so big and it's caused by 10,000 different genetic variants. And so we're just saying everything causes autism and nothing causes autism. Well, okay. That's helpful. So that's my bottom line. I'm like, I don't see it yet. I don't see the thing yet. Maybe we'll find it. I just don't see the thing yet.
I like that you're leaning into some of the complexity of this. As stated in the video that you keep mentioning, it's just said that humans are not wired to think scientifically. And
Yes.
so it's sort of out of nature to have to do a deep dive in this. I
Yes.
do think culturally we're getting to a position where everything's becoming layered and complex with AI being so prevalent. We don't know when we watch a video if it's real. We don't know if we see a photograph, if it's an actual picture, or if it's been modified. And so fact checking is almost having to become a personal pursuit of anybody who's wanting legitimate, real information.
That, to me, in some ways, Tyler, you hit the nail on the head of what I was thinking about when we sit down to do this video. I'm like, really, parents, that's part of what I mean. People out there on the internet, okay, forgive me, this sounds like a rant of an old guy, and I try to avoid ranting when I'm here. But people out there on the internet, I think sometimes think that my patients and my parents and the people that we work with and that I care about are somehow stupid or something. I mean, it's just like we're not that dumb. We're not that gullible. Don't be that gullible. Do the research. Do the research. Not, don't go down. Be cautious. Like you said, it's a slippery slope. There are tons of rabbit holes out there these days on the internet that are just, flat earth kind of, craziness, right? There are tons of rabbit holes. But if you take on the challenge of learning a thing or two about statistics, learning a thing or two about then there's great, there's great stuff out there and learn. And I mean, that's what I see. My patients, like the parents of the majority of the kids that I see with autism, are amazing. They are amazing at synthesizing lots of stuff and figuring out what is truly important and best for their child.
Yeah.
That's what I'm all about. That's what I'm all about.
When you mentioned the flat earthers, I saw this video of a guy who took a bunch of flat earthers to Antarctica, and then the flat earthers are like, "Oh, okay, we're wrong." it totally cured the problem. I know we're coming up against a tight stopping point today. I would say, can we summarize this kind of in one sentence? If you say, what's your position about this issue, and your word of wisdom to a mom who's dealing with trying to figure out, or pregnant, with child, as the Bible would say.
Yeah. Yes.
What's your word of wisdom to her if she's considering using Tylenol?
I think the biggest thing I would say, I mean, a huge part of what I would want to try to do is to reassure, calm the anxiety. Yes, autism is a concern. Yes, autism is a risk, but we're still talking about a relatively small risk. And again, now people will get into details and want to press me for numbers, but my point is, I mean, I see a lot of kids these days that come in that are diagnosed with autism, and I'm like, I don't know, let's call it Johnny's disorder, right? Because Johnny's just Johnny, and he's a little quirky. And God love him, he's going to be a great kid, So I guess what I would say is I want to reassure those parents out there that don't be too fearful of autism and all that stuff. Eat healthy, take good care of yourself, exercise regularly, don't drink. That's during pregnancy. But yeah, live your life. You're going to be okay. Your child's going to be fine.
Fantastic words of wisdom. Well, Dr. Brad, thank you so much for your time. If you're watching this right now and you want to learn more information and even have a link to that video that we mentioned from Peter Attia, you can go to bradrobinsonmd.com and click on the compass. If you click on the compass, you'll be able to find resources about this and many more. Thank you so much today for tuning in with us on another episode of The Compass.
All right.
That was really good. I enjoyed the conversation.